So before I begin to share our words, some of you might have noticed that it looks a little different here. There's going to be the greater unveiling of this table next week. Next week is next Shabbat. We're going to celebrate, and now you're all going like, what's going on? Next week is going to be our celebration of our commitment and how we're trying to grow towards inclusion and welcoming people with disability by recognizing that everybody has a gift to share. And one of the reasons from our Torah writing project that some of you might recall, when we made a new Torah, there were lots of other opportunities for people to make gifts that were meaningful to them, and one of them was for a new table, partially because it was a little rickety and moving it forward, and whenever I leaned against it, it would go over there, and I'd have to pull it back for Holly, and it was all confusing. But the thing about this table, then we'll show you also next week, if you're going to join us again, is that it moves a little bit so that we have a little side table that comes out of the side over here, right below where this part is, so that if we have somebody who's in a chair, that they be able to read Torah. So this table is designed to be a little bit more accessible. And again, we'll talk more about it and share more about it, but it is a lovely gift, and it came here the other day, and it's quite lovely. It's nice to bring some energy within our sacred space. And there's lots of gifts that people give all of the time, and this is one of the most recent ones. But we'll tell you more about it next week, of course. But since everybody was looking, I had to acknowledge, the new table in the room. Okay, now, speaking of gifts, when my kids were little, those were like the best gifts I ever got, right? When my children were really itty-bitties and they would draw these things, those were the most amazing things that would really fill me up. Now they try and find a tie, but all right. One of my most favorite of gifts is my last congregation in Atlanta. We had our own preschool there. All the synagogues had their own preschool, and we had our preschool. And I would go and check things out, and it was lovely. And my kids go through our synagogue's preschool. And my youngest, Noah, who's 15, will hate that I'm telling this story, so don't tell her. Oh, it's being recorded, right. And one of the gifts that she gave me was a picture of our synagogue in Atlanta, and it was kind of this Mediterranean tone, and it had all of these domes. And underneath it, remember, she's like in pre-K at this point, she learned something terrific from her father, and she writes at the bottom what that place was, and she wrote, D-U-H, temple. Because that's how I talk. And I was really moved by this gift, and I still have this picture of the synagogue and the dome, and underneath it says, temple. Giving gifts are powerful. It brings us closer to one another, don't they? That's why we do it. It's not just to give them something that they want. It seems to have grown into that, but that's not really what a true gift is about. The true gift is something that comes from the heart. So last week we were talking about folks who are giving these gifts, and Aaron was collecting these gifts, and Moses wasn't around. Moses was up on the mountaintop receiving the Torah from God, and being away for so long, these newly released former slaves were getting a little more than just fidgety. They were really concerned, and their greatest experience of God was through Moses. And when Moses wasn't around, they panicked. And so they built the golden calf. Now that was a big problem, and the calf was destroyed, and Moses broke the tablets and went back up and had this conversation with God, and there was a new set. Okay, we know all of that. But there were some gifts that they were given in order to create this idol that was going to distract them from something that was really important. So while Moses is up on the mountaintop, begging God to come close, to reveal God's truest of selves to Moses, a desire to see God face to face, God says, no, you can only see my back. And has this really amazing encounter with Moses, something that either we just pass through because it's so anthropomorphic we don't really get it, how can God have a back? Or we can yearn for something like that, but we don't really know the way. We don't really know the path in order to have such an encounter. But I would suggest that lots of us have those encounters regularly, whether it's outside in nature and some of our folks who like to hike and ski, or it could be in a real conversation where you really encounter somebody else. That's what happened with Moses and God, even though Moses couldn't see God's face because that's just too intense. We couldn't handle it and we would die. So, Moses returns with the tablets, and then into this Torah portion, we see the construction of the Mishkan. Now, the Mishkan is the tabernacle. It's a portable temple, right? They're traveling along with this tabernacle. Before this, there were lots of really particular, meticulous details on how to build the tabernacle, and we're going to see the same stuff all over again. This part is really, folks who really like that are in construction or engineers. It is meticulous. But right in this place of the Mishkan, and you see colors, and you see details, and you wonder, why couldn't Moses or any of us see God's face? We have all of this very precise information for the Mishkan, for this tabernacle, for the place that God is supposed to dwell, not because God needs housing, but because we need a chance to come close to God. We need the Mishkan in order to have a central area where we can have an encounter of some sort. God recognizes that and gives these details. So now the Mishkan is going to start to be built. It's wonderful. And again, a lot of detail, meticulous detail, but it is elegant and it's beautiful. And the text says, this is what the Eternal has commanded. Take from among you gifts to the Eternal. Everyone whose heart so moves him shall bring them gifts for Adonai. So lots of rabbis talk about this as a great opportunity for fundraising. Okay, it's true. Because when you look at the rest of the text, you're going to see all of these different kinds of resources and materials. Some are quite expensive and some are goat's hair. All of them are relevant. Every gift matters. But let's look less at the physical, at the material. Take from among you gifts. It's not just the material. Instead, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, required something beyond the physical. It required the Israelites to take from yourselves a gift that they were going to give to God. It wasn't just a command to be generous. Instead, it required generosity of the self. Generosity of the self. Each person was asked to contribute his or her own unique gifts and skills, experiences, wisdom, gifts. Who we are, something that is a part of us, not just the material. We said that last Shabbat there was this text that talks about all of God's attributes, being gracious and loving, caring, slow to anger, all of these qualities that we are supposed to emulate. We have those gifts. The question is, do we give them? Do we share them? Once upon a time, we thought of sacrifice only as giving something up. Right? A sacrifice is tied to sacred. It's the idea of pursuing something that's holy. The term for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban. In korban, you see another word that's karov. Karov means near. The gifts that we give bring us closer to one another. That is the power of giving. It brings us closer, no matter what it is. It could be our time, it could be our energy, it could be our shekels, it could be our money. Whatever it is, there's an opportunity to draw closer. But I see so often in our world and in our society, we're told to kind of build these fences and keep a distance and respect my privacy, which is true. Those are all important things. But there has to be a balance between when I'm not involved with another human being and I don't get close enough to someone that I can't see even their eyes, only from a distance. If I'm really going to have an encounter with someone, then perhaps I'm going to see myself through their eyes. Martin Buber is this incredible theologian, thinker. He was amazing. And his idea was that you get closest to God through an encounter. The term that I keep using over and over tonight. A real encounter. Once we start thinking about encounters, it kind of goes away. When you start analyzing it, then it's not real anymore. Like, it's nice conversation, but it's not going to be that higher moment where God's presence can dwell among us. I look at this text, and I see this elegant Mishkan, something that those folks centuries ago, millennia ago, put all of this energy and their material wealth into building so that they can come closer to God. And I think a lot of folks in our day just want God to kind of show up in my life. And if God doesn't, then I don't really have the time. Prove it, right? Show me the money. How is this really going to happen? Show me that there's a God. Well, I don't know if it really works that way. But if we look at the text, and if we are going to say, take from among you gifts, in a day and age when we are taught to keep and build for ourselves, we don't really focus on the giving. I'm not just talking about money. So one of the things that's happening a lot these days is lots of conversations within our synagogue because we're growing kind of quickly. It's a lovely thing. It's amazing that folks are trying to find ways to connect. We're also growing a little faster than we can handle. There's a lot happening here, and we can always do better. Yes, it's true. But if we try and find our way to continue other folks to share those gifts, to say that this will be a safe space, a place where I could be known and accepted for who I am, well, I think that's holy. It's not just good membership. I think it's holy. It's sacred. How can we be a part of that in a place that you want to make holy? What are the gifts that you're willing to give to others? How do we show up in one another's lives? I remember very clearly getting an MS, I told you folks about this, getting my MS diagnosis some years ago, and it was really kind of terrible. And the meds were hard, and I couldn't really focus so much, and I was trying to go to work, and it really wasn't a good idea, and I couldn't do a lot of things, and all of a sudden, some of my congregants show up, and they're cleaning my lawn because it was a mess, and doing the yard, and it was really lovely things. What a gift. Would they have done it for somebody who wasn't their rabbi? I think they would have. But before that moment when I said, would you have done this if it wasn't your rabbi? Then they said, I don't really know. What can we do? How do we show up for one another? Can we make sure that you know the folks in your area where you're sitting that you don't know? Can we meet somebody new during the oneg? I think that is as holy as anything else that we can do in this building or beyond. So friends, I'm going to ask you to consider, what gifts can you give? How do you show up? How do we build a community where gifts are given, celebrated, appreciated, and recognized, and where it's a safe place to be our authentic selves? Going to Israel and having all of these conversations with some of our congregants, even some who are in the room, when we get to the Dead Sea, we wonder, why is it called the Dead Sea? It only receives. It only takes. It never gives. And so it's dead. That's not how we want to live in this world. And I don't think that's how God wants us to live either. Okay, let's turn back